If you are looking to upgrade your closet for that last-minute holiday gift, check out Circle Rock Menswear at CircleRock.com today. Use the code ZONE25 today and receive a $25 gift card good for your next Circle Rock purchase. Again, that's CircleRock.com and use promo code ZONE25.
The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast as part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. With your hosts, Giles Farrell and Ben Remington.
Welcome, Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. Over there somewhere is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Whispering so quietly because he just put his son down for the evening. So Ben will be a little bit quieter than usual on your ear holes this week.
This is what podcast fans have been asking for 5 to 6 years.
Finally, the podcast gods have looked down with favor on our listeners.
You're welcome.
I don't know why they've been waiting for this after all this time or why they even stuck with us. That's more on them than it is us at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we really can't be held responsible anymore.
No, definitely not. Yeah, we're gonna get right to it. So it's a little later than usual on Monday evening, so let's get after it. The big news of the week, or the last week, I should say, is the Minnesota Wild were officially awarded the 2021 Winter Classic at Target Field in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The game will be played against an opponent to be determined, but obviously a big milestone for the Minnesota Wild as they finally get their long-awaited Winter Classic, which they've been begging the league for so many years. And I don't know about you, but I just can't get myself up to be excited at this juncture.
I don't blame you, but for whatever reason, the Winter Classic means a lot to a lot of people here, and you've written articles about it in the past, and we talked about it, many times, in fact, how little people should care about getting the Winter Classic here. But they do. And so I don't know, I don't blame people for being excited about it. If they really, really wanted it and they actually plan on showing up to it, then great. I mean, it's what you wanted. In all honesty, I might go just because I did not go to the Stadium Series like you did. So I do want to experience it. But I'm not going to be heartbroken if I don't. And had I gone to the Stadium Series like you did, I would have very little interest in going to this, even though I do genuinely love Target Field. I don't blame you for having next to no level of interest in this, and I do think that it is wildly overrated by Minnesota hockey fans.
And not to say that, I'm not completely without interest. Like, I'm sure, like, once we get to, like, the week leading up to it, like, I'll, get into a little bit. It just, to me, the Winter Classic has just become a very watered-down product from the NHL for their outdoor games in the last decade. Since they saw the popularity of the Winter Classic, then they instilled all these Stadium Series games, and it really kind of lost its luster for me. And even say had this Winter Classic been given to Minnesota even, just 3-4 years ago, I would have had a much different level of interest. But just the fact that there's just the fact that it's just been so watered down by the NHL, but yet people still continue to go, so they're going to put these games on, has really just kind of killed interest in me, diehard hockey guy. And I've said this before on the podcast this year when it was starting to get reported that the Wild are favorites to land the Classic in 2021, that I think at this point the NHL is just making the rounds of teams who haven't had a chance to host yet.
Yep.
And Dallas this year in the Cotton Bowl, and then Minnesota next year, and who knows what it's going to be next year. Like, if I was a betting man, which I will be this weekend, spoiler alert, I would maybe think somebody like Las Vegas might be in the mix to possibly get some kind of outdoor hockey game. As why would you not try to cash in on the still immense popularity of the Golden Knights before that kind of dwindles down?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. And, you and I have dreamed very, very dreamily about Vegas being the opponent for the Wild and that giving us some level of interest in this Winter Classic. But it'll be interesting to see if Vegas could host one. I mean, they've done Stadium Series in Southern California before. They just did one in Dallas. I think it'd be kind of interesting and a lot of fun to do one in Vegas, which does unfortunately kind of sour the possibility of Vegas coming here for the Winter Classic next year.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath that Vegas is going to be the opponent for the Wild in the Winter Classic. Sounds like St. Louis is the front runner, which just makes it so wonderfully boring.
I know, right?
And, more than it already is. And it doesn't help that the team itself is just kind of stuck in, mediocrity. Batman Forever, as we call it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe next year with some influence of different talent on the roster and maybe, a more promising outlook, that might change an interest, but the Wild versus St. Louis it just seems so blah.
Yeah, 100%. Even though they did just win the Cup, I just don't think the Blues are a draw at all.
They're not.
Vladimir Tarasenko was fun to watch, but he's not even he's not Ovechkin level fun to watch. You know what I mean? Like, he's got good skill, but he's not a super, super flashy guy. So it just is a very, very boring matchup. And that's going to be the damn matchup too. For a lot of folks who want Winnipeg, I hear you. I think that would be a very fun game from a fan perspective because
that would make a
that
great
Jets
atmosphere.
fans would definitely make the trip because they make the trip to St. Paul every time. But I would put that at a 1 to 2% chance of happening because it's a small Canadian market. And that's end of story. What I would really like to see is the Avalanche. I don't get the argument of the Blues being closer to us and that somehow helping the attendance of the game because even though the Blues are closer to us, it's not like it's a short drive. It's not like the Blues are in Madison, Wisconsin or Duluth. I just don't see that, flights from, what's the difference flying from St. Louis versus flying from Denver? And flights are even cheaper from Denver because it's a major hub like MSP. So I really hope the Avalanche. I think the NHL needs to book the Avalanche for this game because, as we've talked about a gazillion times, they need to promote their young stars. Nate McKinnon needs to be in the Winter Classic. Cale Makar needs to be in the Winter Classic. That's why the Avalanche need to be the team. And sure, the Wild aren't an exciting team, but at least you can showcase those guys. And hey, this might be the Wild with Kirill Kaprizov too. So, I think that, that is a distinct possibility that played into this. And so, with that being said, you need to have McKinnon, you need to have Makar, you need to have the Avalanche in this game. I don't see any other option that makes sense, but I'm resigned to the fact that it's going to be the Blues and it's going to be boring.
Yeah, no, and that's a very good point about Colorado just needing to market your best players and the very young, exciting players that the Avalanche bring. I think they are in the Stadium Series this year. I believe it's Colorado against...
Yeah, they're playing at Air Force.
Yeah, I can't remember for the life of me who they're playing at Air Force, but...
And I just don't think that should disqualify them from being in it. Because who's going to watch that Stadium Series? Is it even going to be on national TV?
It's
going to be on NBCSN, right?
Right.
So it's not going to be on NBC. So I don't know. I really think the Avalanche should be the team. But it's going to be the Blues. I mean, it's I would put that at like at 90%.
Yeah. I remember reading some weird thing where the NHL doesn't like to put teams in outdoor games in consecutive years, and I was like, where was this standard for the Blackhawks? But I guess they get a special exemption because it baffles me. And if you're wondering, do the Wild have any input at all? The answer is no. The input more or less with this goes to NBC, who basically decides it for ratings purposes, but every year the ratings for the Winter Classic gets worse and worse, so you just might as well put the two best teams that you can out there, ratings be damned, and just... I've said this so many times. Just put the best teams you can out there, it's your best product, and just let it go. Don't worry about putting Team A on and against Team B because their markets, drive ratings. For crying out loud today, we watched NBCSN have Toronto and Edmonton on in the United States.
Yeah.
You would very rarely see that. That's the kind of thing NBCSN needs to be doing, and they don't.
That was exactly the point I was just going to make. Having markets tune in is wonderful, and getting that fish in a barrel, as you will, of Dallas all watching NBC this year, and Minneapolis market all watching NBC next year. That's nice, but does it really grow the game if everyone's just going to watch only because it's their hometown team? Why is the Winter Classic not a showcase for the best game that you can offer? And to your point, why is it not Matthews versus McDavid? Why is Connor McDavid never has or never will be in a Winter Classic? That's absolutely absurd. It's like you mentioned not showing Gretzky in the 80s, not showing Lemieux in the 90s, not showcasing Sidney Crosby, in the last decade, or Alexander Ovechkin. No, because it'd be stupid. But they're doing that because McDavid plays for a Canadian team. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it also does sound like there's going to be a lot of other stuff around the game, leading up to and after as well. A festival of some sorts. I'd also imagine that there's going to be some kind of like high school tournament or whatnot. Even
I'm sure.
Maybe
That'll
even
be fun.
having like Hockey Day Minnesota centered around it.
Sure,
so
that makes a ton of sense.
That would be something I would have more interest in going to. Is if they had the high school games for Hockey Day Minnesota at Target Field, I'd probably have more interest in maybe going to that as opposed to the Winter Classic, but. We'll see. A lot of things will, be announced in the days, months, leading up to it, so we don't know a whole lot. Opponents, jerseys even. We get to talk about jerseys this week.
That is the one, probably the thing that I'm looking forward to the most, is finally guaranteed getting a jersey out of the Wild, because we've been teased for so long, and not that I have high hopes. Don't get me wrong. I do not have high hopes. But it's interesting, and that's kind of our thing. So,
yeah, on January 1st, when the Winter Classic was announced, Michael Russo of The Athletic, who's just been on top of it from the very beginning, had a little blurb in his big piece on kind of the ins and outs of the game. He said, when it comes to jersey, the Winter Classic jersey will not be the same as the Wild's new jersey, which will likely be released in 2 or 3 seasons, depending on a potential throwback jersey the league is considering for each team in the coming years.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack in that sentence.
There really is.
So, first of all, I said this the other day on Twitter. I said that a Wild Winter Classic jersey should be themed around their alternate M logo.
Yeah.
And Joe, our friend Joe, had a concept drawn up for him, which I was I was a fan of.
Well, you know where that concept came from, right?
Was that ours? Was that our contest?
It was mine, and it was mine. But he asked someone to invert the colors.
Okay.
So it was my design that I made it when I did that third jersey article 2 years ago, and then I believe it was Kine from our friends at Hockey Wilderness who took my design and inverted the colors and made it a cream jersey rather than a green jersey.
Okay. I can remember. We also had some jersey contests back in the day.
Right.
Some good old MS Paint jobs.
That's how I roll. I think that it should, and I think it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. I also think it's interesting that the word is leaked out that the NHL is looking at adding a throwback jersey for every team. Which sounds great, but what kind of throwback are we talking about here? Are we talking actual throwbacks? Because the Wild don't have. I mean, they have the old alternate green. Otherwise, I don't really want to see anything else come back. And other teams too, I don't know, what the hell do you bring back for the Columbus Blue Jackets? What the hell do you bring back for
the Bumblebee?
Right. I mean, there's just some teams who's just they don't have a great throwback. I'd rather see alternates for every team. Something new. And don't get me wrong, half the time you and I have lobbied for throwback vintage jerseys to come back and be a third jersey because a lot of them are fantastic. But there's a lot of teams that doesn't apply to.
Right. So also in there it says the Wild's third jersey will be released in 2 or 3 seasons, and it felt like we were much closer to that this last year when they had some tests done on a potential third jersey that apparently didn't meet the television standards. So apparently I'm taking this as they went back to the drawing board and just started to craft something completely new. I don't know.
How does it take 3 years?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Whoever is in charge of the Wild third jersey, there's a project manager for that project, I'm thinking, they absolutely positively need to be fired. Not even joking. That is a level of ineptitude that I don't know how it could possibly be tolerated. You wanted to come up with a third jersey last year, and it didn't happen because the design was so terrible that it couldn't even be read by fucking broadcasters from the press box, apparently. And you didn't come out with something this year either, when you had plenty of time to do so. I get not coming out with one next year because you're going to have a Winter Classic jersey. That's fine. I don't disagree with that, whatever. But then how do you not come out with one the following year? Like, how hard is it to design a jersey that doesn't look terrible? Seriously, how many? Give me an hour and Microsoft Paint, and I could make you 15 of them. It's really not difficult, and so I just, like, seriously, I really hope somebody got demoted or fired or something over this, because it is absolutely absurd. And no doubt about it, the Wild are losing a ton of money on this.
And I don't know if this is a Wild thing or if it's an Adidas thing or an NHL thing or all of the above. Even the throwback jersey it mentions in there, it says in the coming years. If it's a pure throwback jersey, why do you need coming years to figure that out? Throwback jerseys are already there. You know the design it's going to be. Why does it need to be in the coming years?
Yeah.
Like, I will hammer this again and again and again, but the NBA, year in and year out, like, they have teams come up with different variation uniforms. They call it their city edition or whatever.
Yep.
And then, you can toss in a throwback or two, like, and all it does is it rakes in money. Mm-hmm. Why is the NHL just dragging its feet on what's clearly just something they need as a, cash grab? That's what it is, but it also appeals to the diehard hockey fans like us who go nuts over jerseys.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't get it. It's really not that hard to come up with new jerseys. It's really not that hard. And, if you, the Wild can't even play the card that they want to wait, or there's some kind of, historic franchise. No, they've had a third jersey every possible year. They've been able to have one for how long? Up until this past season. So why don't they have one right now? And it's just incompetence. And the NHL thinking maybe they'll do throwback jerseys, but not doing them for a few years. Again, nothing but incompetence. Like, you could roll those throwback jerseys effing tomorrow. You're the goddamn NHL. You have a contract with Adidas, and you're the only major North American sport that they serve. What the hell is the holdup?
And, it's not just an NBA thing, but you see, NBA new jerseys every year, soccer new jerseys every year. MLB teams, they cycle through jerseys every year. Like Arizona comes to mind. It always seems like they got some kind of new crap going on every year. This isn't just related to one sport. So many sports are cycling through new jerseys every year, yet it just feels like the NHL as a whole is just still stuck in this rut of, you have to have 4 or 5 years in between jerseys, and I can see, not doing it every year, but every 2 or 3 years, I think kind of has to be the ceiling for each team. Don't go any farther than that, because now you're like the Wild. You're stuck in, year 4 of this current jersey design.
Yeah.
Without something new.
Well, and I don't understand how it could ever possibly take more than one season to develop a jersey. Like I said, I can do it in 15 minutes. There's no reason why they can't do it in one season. Like, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to develop new jerseys for any team, let alone all of them.
And it's like,
you're printing off how many jerseys every year to sell for $200 a pop at a pro shop, but you can't make up new jerseys just because reasons. It makes no sense to me at all.
And it's not like you're coming up with different colors. Like, you're using the same color scheme the Wild have had for their entire existence. The same 4 colors are still there. Unless you're going something completely off the board, like black, which was a rumor last year. Like, what's the point? Like,
Yeah.
why? It should not take that long. And
No. We can probably be done with that topic now.
yeah, we can keep going.
we can keep going.
can.
That's the important thing.
Yeah.
To show some restraint.
Yeah. So that was kind of my biggest, bit of info that I was looking for outside of the opponent. Obviously, was the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Anything else fascinate you about this Winter Classic? Obviously, you get the 24/7 behind the scenes Winter Classic look, which I hope it's still Bruce Boudreau, because
Oh God, wouldn't that be amazing?
just more sound bites, please.
Oh yes. Yeah, I just I don't know. I'm torn. Yeah, I just don't know how realistic it is that Bruce is gonna be back next year. But God, would I love it to be Bruce back next year? Like another 24/7 go around to him would just be fantastic. I mean, anything behind the scenes, anything with a mic in Bruce's face is just fantastic. Well, regardless of what you think of him as a coach. But I'm not getting my hopes up. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Yeah.
So this was kind of the other topic I wanted to bring up as we kind of segue out of the Winter Classic, but Peter Laviolette was fired today as coach of the Predators. And so this piqued my curiosity because Bruce Boudreau has been the head coach of the Minnesota Wild for 3.5 years, and there have been 6 coaches in the NHL fired this year already. That is almost 1/5 of the league. It's almost 20% of the head coaches have been fired this year. So my interest was piqued, and I looked it up, and I tweeted this out. Bruce Boudreau, at 3.5 years behind the Wild bench, is now the 6th longest tenured coach in the National Hockey League.
Good Lord. If that's not an indictment of how stupid NHL front offices are, I don't know what is. And like Peter Laviolette, the Predators are not having a good year, but you've got, the rotting corpse of Pekka Rinne in goal. You gave away PK Subban this offseason.
So you could sign Matt Duchene.
So you could sign Matt Duchene, which is, he's a nice player, but what did you think was going to happen? And maybe it's just that the window for that team is kind of shut. And also maybe it's just that they're going through a rough patch. We're just now halfway through the season this year. So I just don't know what they think firing Peter Laviolette solves. And you could say that for almost half of the firings that happen in the NHL. Don't get me wrong. The other half are more than deserved. And typically in those situations, those coaches probably shouldn't have been rehired because it's their 3rd or 4th stop and they've never done a good job anywhere.
Right.
But the other half is just like, what are you doing?
Do you want to take a guess as to the other 5 people ahead of Bruce Boudreau?
Oh, that's a good question.
A little bit of trivia.
Head of Bruce. Is Torts one of them?
Yep. John Tortorella, hired
Okay.
October 21, 2015.
That's what I thought. Wow, I'm struggling, kind of mapping around the league here.
I'll give you a hint. One is within the division, and the remaining ones are out east.
Oh, Paul Maurice.
Correct.
Man, I am. Cooper.
Yep. John Cooper is the longest tenured coach in the National Hockey League.
He's got to be like almost 10 years now, right?
He was hired March 25th, 2013.
Ooh, 7 years. I was way off. Okay, so that's 3 out of the 5. Poof.
I feel like one you're not going to get.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, I got nothing. I can't think of the other 2.
All right, so the one directly ahead of Bruce is Mike Sullivan, Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And then the one that even I would never have guessed was Jeff Blashill in Detroit.
Oh, yeah, wow. I never would have guessed that. You don't think of Detroit being stable anymore because they're so terrible.
Right.
And everyone keeps talking about Blashill getting fired, so I guess I just was... he just kind
it
of
felt like
assumed
Jeff
he
Blashill
is.
was fired like 2 years ago.
Right, exactly.
Hey, and so this kind of brings me around to the question of, like, why, or not why, but, like, what, and we've kind of talked about this already a lot, but it's kind of really all I have at this point, but still, what do you do with Bruce Boudreau? He is in that last year of his contract, quote unquote, and, you know, he is a long-tenured coach in the league, as we just mentioned, and you know he's kind of pulled the Wild out of the abyss this year. Obviously, they're floundering, but you know what do you do with him?
I think a lot of it rides on what he wants to do, and I think that's what I think of him. Is that I would absolutely love to have him back if he wants to. And I kind of understand if he doesn't want to. But, you know, you look at next year, and I don't know that things are a lot different. But adding Kirill Kaprizov, which is a very distinct possibility, certainly doesn't hurt. So I think that's something that you do. But you just you know, leave it up to him. I mean, he's got this consultancy role built into his contract. If he wants to do that, which, I mean, he's in his 60s, for Christ's sake, there's no reason why he wouldn't. Let him do that. And if he wants to coach, I think you take it, and you know, I think he'd still do a good job. I think that any deficiencies the Wild have are, you know, more due to the roster than anything Bruce is doing. Could he do a better job at some things? Well, sure, possibly. I don't think that he's untouchable, and I don't think that he's, you know, a coach that is beyond reproach and is the greatest thing in the universe. But I think he's a good enough coach to keep his job.
Yeah, I've said this before, because you know time is a flat circle, especially on this podcast this year. If I'm Bill Guerin, you know, I'm still trying to get settled in, and you know, there's a lot of things he's got to figure out in the offseason. He's got to figure out who goes where and how to maneuver players off the roster so he can bring in Kirill Kaprizov, as we've discussed. And I just feel like you'd be doing yourself a service by just tacking on, you know, another year or two to Bruce's contract, because I feel like at this point in his career, he probably doesn't want to move anywhere else to coach again, unless it would be like Toronto for whatever reason, where his home is. You know, and so I don't think there's any question for me that he wouldn't mind staying around for another couple of years, but more or less just for Bill Guerin's sake, just to have that kind of safety net. You know, it's not like you're re-signing like John Hines or, you know, Mike Yeo or, you know, some coach who probably doesn't.
John Torchetti.
Yes, somebody who doesn't need another, you know, kick at the can for a head coach.
Sure.
You know, Bruce Boudreau is one of the more decorated head coaches in the NHL, you know, post-lockout.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good safety net to have. And, you know, if it does down the road get to the point where you do want to move on from Bruce, then you have that option. But I just think for the interim, getting Bruce, just tacking on some kind of extension to his deal, just so you can kind of figure out how you want to shape the roster moving forward would be at least how I would go.
Yeah. And I think it would be one less thing to worry about, I mean, I think that getting this roster to the point where it needs to be, and quite honestly, goaltending is such an issue for this team, and solving that riddle, taking something off of your plate, like having to hire a coach, for instance, is only going to help this upcoming offseason. That's going to be very important, like we said, with Kirill Kaprizov likely headed here. And honestly, making sure that Kirill Kaprizov arrives here should be more of a focus than anything, because that's no guarantee.
Right. Yeah. So that's that, I guess. Yeah, I guess we can just dive into the mailbag. We actually got a few questions, so we can dive on some topics here for a little bit, and then we could probably call it a show before we depart for Sin City this week.
Mm-hmm.
I did forget to lead in the show by asking you, are you ready for both the Chiefs and the Vikings to play while we're in Vegas this weekend?
I was very excited for the Chiefs game, yes.
But the question was Chiefs and the Vikings.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the Chiefs play. It's going to be really fun. We're both big Mahomes fans, and it's a very exciting team to watch. So, yeah, I'm pretty pumped to see the Chiefs play on Sunday.
You've got some PR skills dancing around the question I've been asking here. No, you made your feelings well known on Twitter this morning. But,
oh my God!
I just couldn't help but laugh every time we crossed paths in the office. Because you just had this just defeated look on your face, like I have made a huge mistake.
Yeah, I honestly, and I'm sure not a lot of Vikings fans can't really blame me, did not foresee the Vikings making it to the divisional weekend.
No, and I'm an optimist.
Right, and so we booked this trip, and I booked watching the games at the sports bar, not knowing who the teams would be necessarily, and it never even dawned on me. Like I did see it as a possibility, but it was so slim. There was little to no concern whatsoever. And here we are. I get to spend all Saturday afternoon in one of my favorite places in the world with the drunkest, loudest Vikings fans that we could possibly gather in one place. And yeah, I think my only option is getting very, very drunk. I can't, as much as I enjoy being miserable, and don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed being miserable for most of my life. I don't think I can sit through this and just be miserable. I think I have to fight this with alcohol.
The good news is we're going to make it entertaining for you, because we go very, very hard for Vikings playoff games. So
yeah,
then you tack on being in Vegas.
Yeah, that's my concern. Is I've seen you and your friends for regular season Vikings games in Eagan, Minnesota. I can only imagine what a playoff Viking game in Las Vegas. I can't imagine. I literally cannot imagine what a Viking playoff game in Las Vegas is going to look like.
Yeah. For those who are wondering what the hell we're talking about, me and my wedding party and some select guests are going out to Vegas for my bachelor party this weekend, which, as Ben mentioned, we planned out months and months ago, not having this thought in the world that the Vikings would even be here, but here we are. So, send your thoughts and prayers to Ben this weekend as he tries to get through, and actually just send your well wishes to the entire bachelor party because
I know we're gonna need it.
Yikes! All right, into the mailbag. Evolving Wild, our friends at Evolving Wild, they asked, "Are the Wild good?"
I don't know that there's any amalgamation of analytics that can possibly answer that question.
No,
because you can say that they're not, but then they play like they are, and you can say that they are, but then they'll play like they're not. So, Batman Forever is the answer here.
Yes, which you did answer on Twitter.
I never give up an opportunity to use a Batman Forever GIF.
Correct. Nor does this podcast.
Right.
Joe, our friend Joe Bully from 10K Rings podcast, also now the Locked On Wild podcast, asks, what do the Wild do with Marcus Foligno past this year? That's a good question. I think personally he's someone you can probably move and get a bit of decent value for because he is a very good defensive forward for the, your bottom six. And, hockey general managers are one collective groupthink, and boy, oh boy, do they love fourth line effing grinders like Marcus Foligno.
Foligno is a really funny and interesting case because he is an analytics darling right now because he does very well defensively, and at the same time he's absolutely huge, which the non-analytics folks kind of fawn over as well. So I'd be interested to see what the return for him is because he's on a relatively affordable contract with only 1 year left on it. You might fetch a decent sum for him this season towards the deadline. I'd be interested to see what that is. I think you basically only deal him if you're getting a king's ransom. I don't think you actively try to get rid of him because he is a good player, as much as I hate to admit it. I was not a big fan of his off the get-go because I still think he's, with the puck, he's not super strong. He can finish a play and he's great defensively, but I think he still kind of treats the puck like a hand grenade a little bit. But I'd be interested to see what they can get for him.
Yeah. Joe also does ask a Vegas-related question. What do you do in Vegas? Play cards, craps, slots, roulette, sports books, or just eat, drink, and catch a show? Well, this is actually only going to be my second time to Vegas, so I'm still kind of feeling out the process a little bit. But, I think I learned pretty well from you and your degenerate friends in my first go-around. So obviously I love the food, I love the drinks, and I do love the sports books. I also do enjoy just kind of hanging out at the penny slots for a little bit, grabbing a few drinks from there. But, we'll kind of see what this brings. I might try some different things this time around, but I might have to go back for the video blackjack that I was just killing it at last time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me being kind of the, foodie that I am, I love the food there. I just really love the restaurant options they have there and kind of, blowing nearly my entire paycheck on, 3 days worth of meals. I also really do enjoy the grandeur of all of it. So I just kind of enjoyed the atmosphere there. just kind of hanging out and people watching and seeing all the sights and doing all the dumb touristy crap, because why not? You're a tourist. And gambling is very low on the list for me. But yeah, I'll hit up the sports book. I think that's a lot of fun. It's and I will sit at a slot machine or a video poker machine for a little while and kind of milk it along and get some free drinks. I think that's a good time.
Yeah. No, especially when you have a group like we do, like the video, or not the video, the penny slots. Essentially, it's not bad if you're not looking to break the bank and just kind of have a good time. That's a very good way to do it. So I might dabble in a little bit of I might try some roulette. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's worked out for my friend Nick a couple of times. One thing that I wouldn't recommend is craps. We had me and a friend of mine decided that we were going to learn how to play craps, and we were going to try our luck at that. And we spent most of our time on a 4-day or 5-day Vegas vacation at the craps tables, and that is a very good way to lose a lot of money quickly.
Yeah, craps is just... I don't even know if I do craps with fake money.
We finally understood how to play the game somewhere around the third night, and it was probably too late for us at that point.
Yeah, that's true. All right, before this turns into a Vegas podcast.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing. Actually, I forgot. I have to put an ad at the beginning that says we're not going to be recording next week because we will be in Vegas.
Yeah, all likelihood we are going to be far too drunk to record anything coherent.
Yeah, and it's also Vegas, and we're not trying to get blacklisted from anywhere. So.
That's true. The last time was the only time we got a cease and desist order on this podcast.
Right. Let's see. Joe had a couple more questions. He mentions Boudreau surviving another coaching firing.
Yeah, we covered that.
Do I think he could land with a division foe potentially if he gets fired? No, I pretty much said it like it's. I think it's here, or if for whatever reason like Toronto ever opened up, but I think he's kind of at the end of the road for coaching.
Yeah, I somewhat believe him when he said this was his last stop 3 years ago. I think I believe him when he says that.
Yeah. No. So, and then Joe also asked about the Winter Classic. What do you want to see for the events surrounding the Winter Classic? I would just like to see some kind of neat high school tournament. If that can be somehow arranged. It doesn't necessarily have to be like Hockey Day Minnesota, but you can, maybe gather up the 4 or 6 best high school hockey teams, both boys and girls, and maybe have some kind of round robin tournament and have that. That would be cool. But as for stuff, parties or whatnot, I will probably stay away from all that.
Yeah, that stuff is all pretty terrible. And also, while we're on the topic, can we please avoid some mediocre music? Can we just not have bands if we're going to be digging up one-hit wonders from the 2000s or whatever the hell they usually do for the Winter Classic intermissions? Can we just not?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Don't get me wrong. I don't have any kind of death curse against bare naked ladies, but if I see them at another goddamn hockey game, I'm going to lose my mind.
Let's see. Steve Hansen asks, barring an injury, Patterson doesn't really have a roster spot when healthy, does he? No, the Wild are really stacked at defense, and I don't see Greg Patterson having a spot in the lineup this year, and he low-key becomes a buyout candidate this offseason if you can't find somebody to take him.
I don't disagree, but I think he is just good enough to dump him off without having to buy him out. His contract isn't that terrible, and it's only got 1 year left at this point. So I really don't see the need to have to buy him out.
Might be a good low-end buy for somebody trying to hit the cap floor next year.
Well, it could be that too, but I mean, he's also a reliable guy, and most importantly, and add a bunch of important sound effects to this, he's right-handed. And that's something that does not come easily to defensemen in the NHL. So I think that if the Wild do keep him around, that's probably the only reason. And other teams might be very interested in him because of that reason.
Yeah. Alec asks, should we look for players like JP Peugeot or players that could be more for the future? I always look for players at the future at this point. Like, if I'm the Wild, I'm not trading draft capital to add players. I'm trying to get more draft capital, especially when you have kind of a logjam at forward and a logjam at defense. I'm going to look to add to the draft capital, and I would like to see the Wild stack draft picks and actually kind of hang on to them for a little bit. And just building through the draft and the minor leagues and having players come up in your bottom six that you've drafted as opposed to signing or trading for them is just so much more efficient, and the Wild have just neglected it that they're kind of at the beginning of that process. So it's still, going to take a few years, but that's kind of what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as it would be nice to go out and acquire another good young player, like you said, this team needs to shed a forward more than it needs to acquire one right now. And, and he also desperately needs to stock the cupboards for a lot of reasons, especially the future of the franchise. I'm with you on that. I don't think, unless you come across a deal that you literally cannot say no to, I don't think you need to go out of your way to try to acquire more young forwards for the sake of acquiring young forwards, because we saw Paul Fenton do that. And while it's worked out all right, there's a cap on how much of that you can do. Right.
Ethan Hufflin asks, what's your opinion on Eriksson Ek's role and improvement this season? I see him as, he's taken very positive steps this year, and I think next year you kind of have to shuffle him up into the spot that Koivu's going to vacate. Mm-hmm. Whether he's deserved it or not, you've got to give him that chance. And this is something we've hammered about the Wild have just never done right in their past, is give the young players their due shot. They just always get roadblocked by a veteran player. And so I would think he's done enough for me to give him that shot next year. And then if that doesn't work, then that's just something you got to figure out. But you at least tried to give a young player very prominent minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and you can go a lot of different ways with this. I think he's almost a perfect Koivu replacement.
Yes.
I think he's a very, very similar player to Koivu. He's a kid with some size. He's very good on the puck. He's very good defensively. Maybe not crazily offensively skilled, but he can definitely contribute offensively. And as Koivu has in his career, maybe it's going to be a little inconsistent at times. But I think that he's kind of that perfect middle six center like Koivu has been. I mean, again, not a top line center, and we can debate that all we want, but I think he's kind of that Koivu mold. Like, he's literally that Koivu mold right down to the Scandinavian.
Right. Morpheus from Matrix asks, what do we do about Dumba? Do you see Pattern getting a spot as soon as he's healthy? We already hit that. But what do we do about Dumba? Well, you just keep letting him play it out at this point.
Yeah.
There's good there, and you just got to find it again. So just ride it out.
Yeah, a player that talented, you don't just, scratch them or toss them aside because they're not having a good season. you got to help the kid more than punish him for having a bad year.
And then Morpheus also asks, who do the Wild give up to get Kaprizov?
What?
Who do the Wild move to get Kaprizov on the roster?
Oh, I thought you meant who they traded. I was like, well, it was a 5th-round pick to Boston, and I don't even remember the guy's name, but that's not important. You know, that's a tough one. We talked about Foligno being a possibility. You know, it certainly makes a little bit of sense if he can get a decent return for him. You know, Jason Zucker's name is always going to come up whenever you say the word trade. You know, so there's a lot of that. You know, people want to talk about Zach Parise possibly waiving his no trade clause, which I think is very optimistic on their part. But I don't know. I guess you just kind of have to wait and see. You know, Victor Rask is still, I think, a buyout candidate, even though he's played much better as of late. So that's a possibility as well.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just don't think there's been enough from really anyone outside of like Eriksson yet to warrant, you know, whether they should stay or go. So I think you kind of need to see how the last half of the season plays out, and you know,
right.
Hopefully there's a little bit more clarity there than there is now. So
yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe Chuck Fletcher knocks down your door for trying to buy low on Jordan Greenway, and you get a deal that you like. That's a possibility too.
Yeah. Then the last question from our friend Brian Reynolds: is there anything I've missed while not watching a single game for 3 weeks?
Not really.
No.
I have watched most of the games the last 3 weeks, and I have come away with more questions than answers. So, yeah, I don't know. You're in the same boat?
Yeah, no, it's just like watching Batman Forever again. It's like you know what's going to happen. So if it's on, it's on, and if not, it's not.
Yeah.
So that's
yeah.
How
I mean,
it is.
in the week since we last podcasted, they've gone 1-1-1. So, yeah, that's just kind of sums up the last 3 weeks. Really, there's the last 3 games.
Yeah. So, all right, that's the mailbag, and we can call it a show. It's almost been an hour. So, thank you everyone for listening. As a reminder, again, Ben and I are off next week because we are going to be in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. And so, yeah, we're just not going to bring our equipment out with us. So you can follow us on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell, podcast Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. You can subscribe to this show on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, pretty much anywhere you can download and consume this podcast. We are there. If you do listen on iTunes, please leave us a rating. Also, you can find us at zonecoverage.com/wild for our written and podcast content. So that will wrap it up for us this week, and we will talk to you again in a couple weeks.
Later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Gill and the Goaltender podcast.
That's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.